One of the things you learn when you study energy a bit is that energy changes slowly. It changes on scales of decades because the scale of energy, the amount of number of cars, for example, and the longevity of the infrastructure that we have for energy makes it very difficult to effect rapid changes. Automobiles live for 10 years or more. Buildings in which the world uses half its energy live for 100 years. Refineries and power plants last for 40 or 50 years. And so it's very difficult to make changes in the built-up base. The second reason it's hard to change energy rapidly is its ubiquity. We have heat, light, power around us. It touches everyone in society. And so, not surprisingly, many people have an interest in energy. Governments, energy industry, consumers, non-governmental organizations. And the interests of all those players don't always align. So things change slowly. There are other issues associated with interoperability. So BP, the company I was at, could not unilaterally change the kind of gasoline it delivered because it had to work with all the cars that were out there already. And then finally, there's the issue of competition. We already have perfectly good ways of providing heat and light mobility. If you come up with something new, it has to compete economically and at scale with those existing technologies and interests. And it means that things change slowly. Well, the problem does neatly divide into transportation and stationary sources. And so let me talk a little bit about what we can do about transportation to meet that goal of reducing imports of oil. The first is to encourage conservation. Use less oil for transport. Pretty simple, not so easy to do. If you follow these things, you know that Congress has raised the CAFE standards, the automobile efficiency standards, and will hit 35 miles a gallon from the present 25 in about 10 or 12 years from now. That's a big change and a big improvement, but I would note that 35 miles a gallon is pretty standard in Europe. We're not talking about new technology here at all. You can build a perfectly good internal combustion engine with existing technologies, currently a bit more expensive than what we have as standard right now, using technologies like homogeneous charge compression ignition, variable valve timing, exhaust gas recycling. These are all known deployable technologies. We have just not had yet the drive or the will to deploy them. So there's a lot of headroom in internal combustion engines. We can then go further, and electrification of vehicles is something certainly that is on the horizon and will happen at pace. You can go from a pure internal combustion engine to a hybrid, Ford Focus, Toyota Prius, greater mileage, somewhat greater expense. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, the Chevy Volt is one example of that, and then ultimately pure battery vehicles. The pace at which those will happen is really conditioned by battery development, and this is one of the long poles in the technology tent that the Department of Energy is working very hard on and funding a lot of work on. And finally, one can encourage, beyond the vehicles, we can encourage a different fuel mix. Biofuels are probably the most promising thing to be doing there, and as you may know, we need to get beyond corn and sugarcane to learn how to use lignocellulose matter, the structural material of plants, together with energy crops like miscanthus and switchgrass, in order to produce biofuels. I would also remark that ethanol is probably the least favorable of all the biofuels you can imagine, and that there's a good deal of biology and chemistry that can be done to make molecules like butanol and higher carbon molecules that will do a much better job as a fuel than ethanol. So the Department of Energy is mounting a number of programs to try to address the transportation problems. There's an extensive program of loans to automobile manufacturers to try to stimulate new technologies along the lines I've discussed. There's a massive investment in battery development and manufacturing, and there's significant investment in research, both for significant investment both in research for biofuels, as is, for example, in the Bioenergy Research Center that's here at MSU, and also in better molecules and deployment of biofuels. Okay, so that's the transportation story. Let me talk a little bit about stationary sources. What do we do about heat and power? Well, the first thing here again is conservation. There are certainly manifold ways in which we can improve our buildings, electric lighting, heating, in order to reduce the use of energy at a negative cost. Namely, if you install more efficient equipment, then we will see a payback rather rapidly. The Department of Energy is implementing aggressively a set of efficiency standards for appliances. Energy Star is one of the programs we're involved with. We're cranking that up. Building efficiency is something else that we're focusing on significantly. You may know that there is an extensive federal program as part of the stimulus money in weatherization. And we have lots of funds going into people going out and trying to improve the energy efficiency of houses, particularly in cold climates.